poll question up for you today. That poll question kind of make you think a little bit. Which SEC sport is the best from top to bottom? Is it football? Is it basketball? Is it baseball? Or is it women's softball? Which SEC sport is the best top to bottom? And, of course, a follow-up question is, whichever one you choose, you have to ask yourself why. You have to be able to answer that question why. So what does it say about the SEC? I've heard numerous analysts say this, that Auburn is the bona fide second best team in the SEC. So that's going to be part of the conversation as we move throughout today. Also, we'll have just a time of Around the Capstone where we'll talk about some of these other sports and what's going on with them as we circle around the capstone later this morning in the third quarter. And then, of course, the fourth quarter set for that 2-minute warning, giving our final thoughts as we go into the weekend. And we'll have some conversation around the Final Four. But, hey, you can help drive the show if we don't get to those other topics that I mentioned. That's okay, as long as we talk about what you want to talk about. But before we do that, I want to remind you that this is the day that the Lord has made. Let's rejoice and be glad in it. Let's be the difference we want to see in the world today. Xavier, welcome into the program, man. How's your week been?
It's been good. Smooth so far.
Well, what does smooth so far mean?
I mean, you got a couple more days left.
Got a couple more days left that you made it thus far. Well, hey, you heard the poll question. I want to remind everybody to go out and check out that poll question.
Now about that poll question. Why did we leave out gymnastics?
Because there's only 4 choices.
Okay. I mean, that honestly might be the best sport top to bottom.
But the other reason is gymnastics is not at every school either. It's only certain schools that have. Yeah. Now the schools that compete, they're probably pretty good.
Now, that's a fantastic point on gymnastics. I mean, you could put women's basketball up there. One of the few disadvantages with the Twitter poll as far as the number of selections you can have, but also as far as softball, Vandy does not have softball as well, but everybody else, unlike gymnastics, does have softball in the SEC.
Yeah, and you have to look at gymnastics. I don't think gymnastics necessarily upset anybody. Gymnastics in the SEC has been kind of the top dog from the beginning. And the teams that are in there, they're always going to be in it. So if someone wants to write that in, because it's not limited to those 4. If you got a different thought, different opinion, let it be heard. Xavier, you just asked, what about gymnastics? Well, if enough people think gymnastics is it, they can tweet that, their response. And we'll give them a little love. But I definitely think women's gymnastics is among that. But really, it was naming the top 3. I was looking at really the top 3 in terms of those, and then recent championships and things like that. So, but if you want to put women's gymnastics in there, go right ahead.
I mean,
but I know the reason I put let me tell you the main reason I put women's softball. Because until Alabama a few years ago broke the barrier, no team this side of the Mississippi had ever won a championship. And now they're in it every year. Mm-hmm. So since that time, it's like this glass ceiling was broke in that sport. But kind of what's your thoughts on which sport is the best? A few years ago, the dialogue was that the SEC football was the best conference in the country. What's your in terms of the Power 5? Where does SEC football rank right now?
In terms of Power 5,
because we need to talk about
top to bottom.
Yeah, in the Power 5 of football, the Big 5 conferences: Pac-12, Big 10,
ACC, and
the Big 10, 12, whichever one it is. Yeah. Big 12, which only has 10 teams.
Man, wow, that's actually a good question because of what you see. Now, you have the Big 10 this past year that they were extremely top heavy. Extremely top heavy. You had Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, schools like that, Iowa. But their bottom tier teams were winning 3 and 4 games, and that was half of the conference. Now, then you go, I really don't know much about the Pac-12 as a whole, but you had USC come on late at the end of the year. You had Washington in the Final Four, but in the ACC, Big 12, pretty much same situations. I mean, you look at the SEC, every team went to a bowl game except for Missouri and Ole Miss. If I'm not mistaken, I think we had the most bowl teams.
We did. And
so if you want to say top, and one of our teams played for the national championship. So if you want to go technically off of last year, you'd have to say it was either the SEC or the ACC because they had the 2 teams playing for the national championship. But then if you go to the wider spectrum, we had the most teams playing in bowl games, postseason play. And yes, people are gonna be like, well, Mississippi State snuck in there because they needed an extra team.
But do you know we did we beat any ACC team last year?
No.
Florida State beat Ole Miss. Clemson beat Auburn.
And
Clemson beat Alabama. North Carolina.
No,
Georgia came back and beat North Carolina. That was our win. Who else did we beat? Georgia. Did Georgia Tech beat Georgia? I mean, I think they
I want to say they did.
Yeah. I think they had the clear record head-to-head against us. I mean, I know they had the clear record. I don't remember exactly who all won. And all the conferences are kind of top-heavy.
But if you say that, and Clemson was the best team in the country, right?
No, they won the championship.
No, but I'm saying if you want to go, they're the best team in the country. They won the national championship, right?
Right.
Well, okay, they beat Alabama, which would be the second best team in the country, right?
Right.
Well, Ole Miss went 4-8. Florida State beating them is everybody beat them. Georgia beat North Carolina, and North Carolina in the hierarchy would actually have been same level, if not a little bit higher. Be careful
when you say that. We beat Ole Miss too.
But I understand that, but that's what I'm saying.
And we beat LSU who got beat by Auburn. Auburn got beat by Clemson. So I mean, that's what I'm saying.
No, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, as far as the SEC ACC matchup,
let me tell you, the SEC was a weak football conference last year.
It was as a whole.
It was,
but as far as top to bottom, as far as
I didn't ask the top to bottom on that one. I said which one's the best conference. And see, here's the thing: I don't think the SEC's been really great in football in a long time.
Well, let's put it like this: Nick Saban has literally ran off every coach.
Yeah, but even before Nick Saban ran them off. See, everybody keeps saying Nick Saban before he ran those guys off. The reality of it is, let's flash back to when was the last time somebody was relevant in the SEC on a national stage besides Alabama and Auburn?
I mean, if Georgia beat us in 2012, they played for the national championship.
So that's it. Other than that, who else?
LSU.
And when was that?
2011.
Exactly.
So 2 teams since 2007, other than Alabama and Auburn. The streak of national championships. The streak of national championships came from Alabama and Auburn.
But at the same time, you say that you had. I mean, the streak it started with Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was LSU, Florida again. Then it was Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, LSU. Alabama, it was either going to be Alabama or Georgia again. And then, so yeah, the end of the streak has been us and Auburn, but the beginning of the streak was kind of a toss-up.
Right. And so if you go back, there has not been anybody other than Alabama and Auburn to represent and win. And Alabama's the only one that's won one in 5-6 years. So, but what I'm trying to say is everybody keeps saying last year. No, you were building toward last year.
But I think that's why we've seen the changes in coaches. You think you say you go back to 2011, 2012. The only team that has the same head coach technically since Saban's been here is Texas A&M and Kevin Sumlin.
No, Saban's the only one.
No, I'm talking about since they came into the league. Kevin Sumlin's been the only head coach,
and he's an 8-5 coach,
and might lose his job if he doesn't live up to a certain expectation this year.
So that's what I'm saying. He's the only coach there, but those other coaches have left. Why did they leave? Some people say it's because of Saban, but the reality of it is this: the SEC was probably had the best team last year in the country, but they probably was in the middle of the pack. It was ACC when it comes to conference was probably the best conference top to bottom. Okay, and then you probably have the Big Ten and the SEC in the same boat. They both top heavy with middle road teams in the middle. Because you have to throw – you remember you had to throw Penn State in there. Because everybody forget about Penn State when they start talking about the Big Ten. Penn State should have beat USC. But either way, the poll question was supposed to be about – see, that's why you can't start off talking about football because it'll take over the conversation. Back to our poll question is I think the SEC football is down.
As a whole, yes.
As a whole, top to bottom. I think it's been down top to bottom. Because what does it say when Auburn is the bona fide second best team in the SEC? Every analyst comes out this year and says Auburn. And see, I take into consideration who's coaching. Mm-hmm. If you were to ask me,
well, okay, you look at the change of guard in coaching. Urban Meyer leaves, Mark Richt's gone, Les Miles, and so on and so forth. All the big name coaches that were here when Saban got here,
but they didn't leave college football.
No.
So if the SEC had the best coaches, therefore had the best program, where's the best coaches at now in football? The ACC.
Or Big Ten.
They got 2.
James Franklin ain't bad.
3.
How many the SEC got?
1. I said the ACC, not the SEC.
Who's the ACC got besides Dabo and Jimbo? Petrino. Okay, 3.
Fedora at North Carolina.
You would consider him a top tier coach?
He's better than anybody in the SEC other than Nick Saban. Who's better than him in the SEC? That. I mean, the guy that just went to Virginia Tech from Memphis. I forget his name.
Fuente.
Okay. Who else we got? Let me see. You got and I don't even know these guys' names.
Well, don't forget you have Mark Richt at Miami now.
That's right, Mark Richt in Miami.
That's true.
I mean, it's they have the guy that used to be here.
Yeah.
So the type of guys. But my point, back to my question, and we're gonna get to this poll question: which league is the best? And I think we've nailed why I'm not sold on the SEC football being the best in the conference.
Well, it starts with coaching.
Because in basketball, why is basketball better? Why is softball better? Women's softball better? And why is baseball potentially better? Where would you rank SEC football top to bottom?
You want to talk about coaching, you got to go with SEC basketball. You talk about the names in that?
When it comes to the poll question, from top to bottom, which sport is the best in the SEC? Football, baseball, men's basketball, or softball? That's the question that you need to get the vote in on. 205-342-9904, 205-342-9904. We're going to continue that conversation on the other side of which sport is the best. Polling right now, 77% saying football. I think they're blinded by I didn't say which had the best team. Poll question: which sport from top to bottom is the best? Football, baseball, men's basketball, or softball? Which sport from top to bottom is the best in the SEC? Football, baseball, men's basketball, and softball. So that's the sports that's up there. Of course, this year you can make an argument. You can make an argument every year for gymnastics. You can make an argument every year for the women's basketball in terms of what they're doing this year. 2 teams in the Final Four. Mississippi State, newcomer to the party. South Carolina has been trending in that direction, taking on Stanford, and Mississippi State trying to topple the mighty UConn Huskies women's basketball team.
120 wins.
Here's the thing. Is that good for basketball, though? See, to me, everybody always says that this is a sidebar, UConn's women's basketball is the same thing as football and Nick Saban. No, it's not. Nick Saban gets beat every year. Nick Saban's had one undefeated team. Even in his dominance, there's parity. And to me, I think it's bad for women's basketball because of what UConn does. It makes it look like I don't care how good a coach is, there's something wrong with your sport when no one can beat you ever.
I mean, 120 wins. That blows UCLA's record out of the water.
Actually, they're close to setting the record for most wins by any Division I team in any sport, period. So the key is when you look at it, maybe Mississippi State. If Mississippi State pulls it off, then we'll put women's basketball in the top, no matter what the poll's saying. Right now, the poll trending 70% football, 5% baseball, 5% men's basketball, and 20% softball. And I didn't. The way James put the question up is the way I told him this morning. But when I originally wrote the question, I said based on the current trend, which sport would be better, and that's 2 different answers. Right now, I'm sorry, I disagree with everybody that's voted that football is the best sport in the SEC from top to bottom. I mean, and I'm not talking about which team has the most talent, which conference has the most talent. The SEC. The SEC is which one's going to get the most love? SEC football. But from top to bottom, trending especially, you don't see this league. I mean, I think it reaches max. So let's talk a little bit about baseball. And I don't watch a lot of baseball, but I know that right now that baseball, week in, week out, year in and year out, they're always going to have teams in the competition. And here's the thing about baseball that I tell people that I know makes it one of the top leagues, because Vanderbilt is a champion. I mean, Vanderbilt is a legit powerhouse in baseball. And so when you look at that, you got South Carolina, you got Missouri, you got Vanderbilt, and LSU and Arkansas and Auburn seem to be getting their game back. So you could easily see that you have 6, 7, 8. Mississippi State is a contender in baseball. So you can see easily you got 7, 8 teams in baseball that are going to be relevant and in the conversation when it comes down to the end of the season. Arkansas sitting at 20-5, Auburn at 21-6, LSU at 18-9, Mississippi State at 17-10. But the worst record they have in the SEC is 4-3, and that's because they played each other. And then in the East, you got South Carolina at 5-1, only lost to Alabama. Can you believe that?
And
Kentucky,
that's Alabama's only win.
Yeah, Kentucky at 5-1. Missouri at 4-2, and Vanderbilt, who's been up there and will, I believe, get things right in the SEC at 3-3. So baseball has a legitimate argument that if you were to stack the top 14 teams in baseball and put them against football at the same school, baseball would have more teams ranked higher. The descending order would be in favor of baseball. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. So when you move to the next sport, so I think baseball is in front of football from top to bottom. So that means football is at least what?
Second.
At least second. All right. So that leaves women's softball and men's basketball.
On softball, you have Alabama, of course. Florida's turning into a powerhouse.
No, Florida's a powerhouse now.
Auburn's turning into one.
That's the one that's turned into one. Auburn used to be that victory you could count on. Now you're looking at Auburn in their softball. And
Tennessee's always had a good softball team. Softball's been pretty deep as well overall. And, Alabama finally breaking through a few years ago and winning the first national championship game, for a team east of the Mississippi. So it's continually growing as well.
And this is something I've been covering very recently as far as SEC softball over the last few years. I tell you, at least in my mind, and I'm going to explain this later on today on the Gary Harris Show, why I think softball from top to bottom is the best in this poll question. Because you mentioned all those teams. Florida's won a national championship, of course. Alabama won in 2012. Auburn nearly won a national title last year, and you look at the RPI rankings, for the first two RPI rankings, the lowest team right now in the NCAA's RPI for this week is Ole Miss at 43, and they also made an NCAA regional last year. So you have a possibility right now, if all of these SEC schools are above 500, that you could get about 9 or 10 teams in an NCAA regional.
The worst record is 18-13.
Yeah,
and that's Missouri, and that's because they're 1-4 in SEC play. That's the worst team in softball. Is 5 games above.
And what I want people to understand is I'm not talking about which sport you like the best. That's not the poll question.
We know which one wins that.
The poll question is which team represents top to bottom the best overall sport. In other words, if there was a conference challenge to other conferences, which conference would come away with the most wins? Sort of like they do in basketball with the Big 12 challenge.
Yeah, Big 12, Big 10. You have the SEC, ACC.
Yeah, I think that softball quickly I think softball, if you lined up in this case, Vanderbilt doesn't have one. So if you took Vanderbilt out in all the other sports, softball has a really, really good chance that they would be the team with the most victories, right? So that leaves basketball and football. And so let's just look at basketball and football head to head. This year in the final 8.
In the Elite 8, you had 3 SEC teams.
And then the one that didn't make it was Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. Vanderbilt.
And Arkansas got beat by North Carolina and had them up by 5 with 3 minutes to go and got outscored 12-0.
And also, you got to look at it like this. South Carolina and Florida had to play each other.
Right.
So you could have had, in men's basketball, if that hadn't happened, you could have had another 2 SEC schools in the Final Four. Potentially 3.
Vanderbilt should have beat Northwestern, had the game won, just had a brain fart on the play. And Robert Saucier putting gymnastics up there. Robert, we had gymnastics part of the conversation, just only could put 4 schools in the poll. Gymnastics would definitely be in that conversation. But when you look at basketball, the SEC is maybe not as good as football today, but it will be in the future. When you look at the trend, right now it's already it makes the argument because Arkansas lost to North Carolina, Kentucky lost to North Carolina.
Yep.
And if South Carolina doesn't make it, who beat them?
North Carolina. No.
Yeah.
Is that
no? They play Gonzaga.
Who's
the number one?
Who's the number one overall seed?
So Villanova was actually the number one overall seed.
Number 2 overall.
Yeah,
seed.
yeah. They were one of the top 4 seeds. So the SEC would have only lost to number 1 seeds and each other than Vanderbilt. And we know Vanderbilt had the worst RPI rating, the worst record of anyone to ever be in the tournament, and only got in as of late. So when you look at that, and then you look at what SEC football has done, that's not what's making the difference, though. If you look at Tennessee, Mississippi State, Alabama, No, Robert, that's where I disagree with you. Robert Saucier said it only makes sense for this year. No, it makes sense for the future because of the coaches that they have hired in basketball versus the coaches that have been hired in football. SEC football, when it comes to teams, we may not be the last conference, but I'm not sure we're not the worst conference from top to bottom when it comes to coaches in college football, Power 5.
You look at what basketball's done. Auburn with Bruce Pearl, Alabama, Avery Johnson, an NBA head coach at one point, Bryce Drew, Ben Holland, Mike White, who replaced Billy Donovan, took his team to the Elite Eight in his second year. And the list goes on. Tennessee. Who did they hire? I can't. Then we're selling guys
Rick
left
Barnes.
and right. Rick Barnes, who was at Texas and took Texas to the tournament every year. They're 8 or 9 deep of high quality head coaches in basketball that either were at other programs and they won successfully, or NBA level and won.
So that's why I say trending this year, SEC basketball was better. And if I look forward, I'm going to tell you SEC basketball is going to be better than SEC football moving forward. Hey, listen, absolute. Robert says, so now Martin can predict the future. No, I can't predict the future. I can just tell you that okay, Robert, let me ask you this. Who's going to win the SEC in football this year? Who's going to win the SEC in football?
Alabama.
Why?
Because who's Florida has been the best team the last 2 years to come out of the East.
We got,
and they're terrible.
Why do we say Alabama's going to win? Because he has more talent and he's Nick Saban, right? So when I look at the rest of the league, when I look at football and basketball,
John Calipari at Kentucky, didn't even mention his name.
I mean, the coaches that you name on when you look at the coaches in basketball, you look and go, man, these guys are trending up. They're going in the right direction. And they got the 2 bottom rung teams fired their coaches.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if they got better coaches yet or not. The VCU job seems to be the job you take if you want to get a next job.
Missouri also just got the #1 player in the country to commit to them.
So talent and coaches make the difference. You got to have talent, but if a coach can't get there, no one's worried about LSU because of Ed Orgeron. If Tom Herman goes to LSU or Jimbo Fisher goes to LSU, we look at the exact same team different because of the coaches. That's why the SEC in football is not where it used to be and why basketball is better. And I think right now football probably of the 4 listed from top to bottom is the worst of those 4 leagues and possibly would be behind gymnastics as well. That's just my thought, And since I host the show, I guess I get to make that opinion, don't I?
Yeah.
Well, everybody disagreeing with me on the vote. Hey, keep the votes coming from top to bottom. Which sport is the best in the SEC? Football, baseball, men's basketball, softball. And, hey, we've had several people mention gymnastics. Come back on the other side. We'll make a quick trip around the SEC, around the capstone right here on the Blitz. We've had a heated debate here, or conversation, not really debate. I think we're all kind of agreeing from the sense of Alabama football, maybe middle of the road. And, the SEC in terms of football, kind of middle of the road, second, third in the conference in terms of the Power 5. But in terms of its own conference, it is clearly not the #1 sport top to bottom. Actually, right now, in our opinion, it may be 4th or 5th. It may be behind men's basketball based on the results of this year. And if you look forward with the coaches, and we're going to go to that back in the fourth. We're going to go back to that in the fourth quarter. We're going to go to that list of coaches in the SEC football and SEC basketball and show you why basketball very well may be poised to become the most dominant sport from top to bottom in the SEC, because I think it all starts with coaches. It used to be, the dialogue used to be that the best coaches were in the SEC along with the best talent. But that's no longer the case in football. In softball, it's time for our round the capstone segment, so we'll tie it in with our poll question. We said right now, if you're really being open and honest and not biased about, what your favorite sport is or which team has the biggest following or anything like that, if all things being equal and the fan bases were the same, the SEC would probably be in softball would probably be the top sport in softball. I mean, in the SEC right now would be softball. And, of course, we know Coach Murphy went a long way toward making that, a reality here in terms of helping the SEC as a whole, as well as making a difference in the state of Alabama. I reached out to him. He couldn't be on today because of traveling. They're going to be traveling to Missouri for a 3-game set starting today. But the Alabama softball team is one of the top teams year in and year out. They've had 2 SEC losses. They've only had, I think, 3 or 4 losses total.
They're 31-4 overall.
31-4 overall. And Coach Murphy just got 1,000 wins this week. I mean, he hit a milestone. Only a handful of coaches have done that as a whole when you look across the landscape. So he's done his part to make sure that the SEC softball is relevant, and I love the way he's done it. He's went out grassroots, built a fan base for softball, and I mean, they are literally, if you could get the same, think about this. If there was 100,000 fans for softball, just say, for instance, it's been around and it was 100,000, how crazy would it be to go to a softball game? I know this is a football town, football station, but the reality of it is what Coach Murphy and the other coaches in the SEC and at Auburn, what he's done, he's built a team in the midst of the SEC softball being a powerhouse conference. So,
I mean, and if you look at it long term, his run at Alabama, and you look at Coach Patterson's run in gymnastics, the only thing that you can compare that to is when Bear Bryant was here in football, as far as longevity, length and the longevity of it. And yes, Coach Saban is on his way to that, but he's been here half the time.
Right. Yep. And so it's a fast-paced game. Of course, if you have dominant pitching in softball, that's why some people knock it, is because if you have a dominant pitcher in softball, you can literally own another team and own a series and be a champion. But, that's like saying if I have 325-pound linemen that run a 4.9, well, okay, you go out and get 325-pound guys that run a 4.9, or go out and get the dominant pitcher. So it's crazy what happens in terms of that. But around the capstone, let's move on. Coach is going to be traveling today. A team I want to give a shout out to is the track team. I know we don't talk much about track team, but they're over there setting records like crazy in terms of their throwers, their jumpers, the sprinting. They've had a really good indoor track season. Now they're rolling into the outdoor track season. They're not going to be home for a little while. The next track meet at home is going to be next Friday. But if you get a chance to go out, track meets are very interesting to me because there's so much stuff going on. But if you get a chance, go out and check out them next Friday. They'll be back home. But today they're going to be competing out at the Stanford Invitational and then back down to Florida. Actually, they're competing in both. They're at Florida for the relays down in Florida and out and a meet in Stanford today as well. And then they'll have another day tomorrow. So we'll give you an update on that on Monday. Coach Dana Dobransky and her team set to head off to the NCAA Regionals in Morgantown, West Virginia. Coach Dobransky trying to get the Tide over the hump back to that national championship level. Dana and I were classmates. I'm really pulling for her. They have a good, strong team, but, hey, they're competing in the best best conference in gymnastics from top to bottom, and hopefully they can take home that NCAA regional championship on tomorrow, and then they'll have the NCAA championship semifinals on the 14th in St. Louis, Missouri. So we'll be watching that and give you an update on that on Monday on Around the Capstone. And last but not least, Coach Goff, things didn't go the way he had hoped to. Down in Auburn, had one bad inning, lost 4-3, coming off of a weekend where they did get that first SEC win, but still dropped 2. And, when you're building a program, you do have to take more victories. And Coach Goff said, hey, I'm doing it the right way. It's going to take time. I'm learning my players. But they were 1-2 against South Carolina, but they won 4-2. They took them to overtime, extra innings, and lost 6-5. And then they lost 4-2 against one of the top 5-6 teams in the country. So they're going to be playing against Arkansas, which is also the number 21 team. That's what we're talking about. Good from top to bottom as a whole, the league is. But if you get a chance, 6 p.m. tonight, Alabama going to be taking on Arkansas. So go out and check those guys out. That brings to a conclusion this edition of Around the Capstone. As we move throughout the season, we'll be catching up with the coaches. Hopefully we'll catch Coach Murphy and others on our Around the Capstone on Monday at 6:30. This is the Blitz. I'm Martin Houston. Coming back on the other side, we're going to give you our closing thoughts in the 2-minute warning on who we think and why we think SEC football is no longer the big dog in the SEC itself. We have this conversation going right now about which sport is the best from top to bottom in SEC. And we're going to close it out by, we're going to, the poll question. Let me see what the poll question is saying right now. 15% saying softball, 16% saying baseball, 3% men, 66% football. I don't think football is number one. As a matter of fact, of these 4 right now, I would say that it's probably 4th. I would say that baseball, if you take percentages, how many teams in your league legitimately have a chance to make it into the Final Four of college football, the Final Four of basketball, the College World Series, or in baseball and softball? That's not the championship, but just making it. Forget champion, because we only have one team in the SEC that legitimately has a chance to win a national championship right now, in my opinion. In football, that's Alabama. In baseball, how many teams would you say you have? More. Basketball, now you have more. And in softball, you have more. And in gymnastics, you have more. in women's basketball, and in track.
Swimming.
I mean, swimming, track, all of those sports.
Cross country.
And everybody keeps saying Nick Saban has ruined the SEC. Nick Saban did not ruin the SEC. He
just ran
because
somebody away.
Running somebody away is not.
No, he didn't run somebody away.
He ran them away, but that's not where I was going. He ran them away. He ran. They tucked tail and ran. But the athletic directors are responsible for hiring their replacements. If you look at SEC football, you put the blame on the quality of SEC football directly at the foot of those who are hiring the coaches. When you look at this year alone, the SEC in football was down. What's going to change that? What's the hope? Okay, other than Nick Saban, who's going to be better next year in the SEC?
Who's the hope to supplant him?
No, I didn't say no. The gap so far that I'm not worried about. Who's going to be? Who would be able to go out and beat anybody other than Alabama in the SEC in football? Come on. If you took the best team from the other Power Fives, if you took Oklahoma, if you took USC, if you took Ohio State and Clemson, who in the SEC could beat those teams? If you take Alabama out of the mix. All right. Now, in baseball, you take the same top teams in every other conference, and you would go, well, South Carolina would have a chance. Florida would have a chance. Arkansas would have. I said Florida. Arkansas would have a chance. So there's several teams that would have a chance.
Same with softball. Same with men's
and then in men's basketball.
Same with women's basketball.
Because
gymnastics.
Yes.
Same with every other sport. There's one team in SEC football that runs the show, and it's been that way for a while now.
Now let's look at some of these coaches real quick because time's running out on me. When you look at the SEC, this is the way they were ranked in basketball going into the season. Johnny Jones fired. He was 14. Kim Anderson 13 fired. Mike Anderson was the number 12 coach.
NCAA tournament.
Avery Johnson. Mark Fox at Georgia.
Avery Johnson signed the best class in Alabama history.
Mark Fox. If Georgia doesn't lose their top player, they may make it this year. Andy Kennedy. Mike White. Bryce
Elite
Drew.
8.
Frank Martin.
Final Four.
Billy Kennedy. Bruce Pearl.
Played 4 freshmen.
Rick Barnes. Ben Howland. And John Calipari.
Elite 8.
Listen to that list of coaches. Now let's go down the football coaches.
Nick Saban.
Gus Malzahn. Kevin Sumlin.
Ed
Orgeron. Brett Bielema. Mark Stoops. Jim McElwain.
Butch Jones.
Kirby Smart. Who's at Florida? I'm just messing with you. McElwain is at Florida. I'm just messing with you. Hey, you got what's his name over at South Carolina, who failed at Florida. That's what's messing my mind up. Muschamp. You start looking at these guys. Vanderbilt, Barry Odom at Missouri.
Barry Odom in Missouri and Derek Mason
at Vanderbilt.
Ole Miss has
Hugh Freeze, and Mississippi State has Mullins. But none of those guys strike fear into your heart. McElwain is probably the number 2 coach. Bielema's probably the number 3 coach. He just didn't have talent. That's probably.
Bielema was in the Big Ten and was the second. Was either the first or second best team every year in his division. Now he comes to the SEC.
But he didn't have talent.
But he didn't have the talent, and he's a middle of the pack.
Yep.
But looking at this list real quick, besides Alabama, what school can say their football coach is better than their basketball coach?
Or their baseball coach.
Or their baseball coach.
Or their softball coach. I'm not trying to get folks stirred up, but listen, there's some work to be done in football as a conference. They have to get better. To me, the trend is basketball will become the best sport from top to bottom based on the coaches and the hires that have been made in the last couple of years in SEC sports. That's my prediction. Softball, I think, holds that position now, with baseball being second, men's basketball being third, football being fourth in the ones that we had in the poll.